In ancient Egypt, life was good. But it was also fraught with inexplicable danger. To understand their universe, the Egyptians did a remarkable thing. They turned their hopes and fears into an astonishing array of deities and gave each of them a name. But even in the eerie realm of the supernatural, Egypt's gods and goddesses transcended the extraordinary. In Egypt, gods were plentiful, but they were also as complex and mysterious as the civilization that spawned them. Hathor, a woman with the horns of a cow, was the goddess of fertility, but when angered, she could also destroy humanity. Sekhmet, the lioness, symbolized the nurturing warmth of the sun, but she could also inflict its scorching heat. Selkit, the scorpion, could literally give or take your breath away. Her sting had the power over both life and death. The duality of the gods stemmed from an observation gleaned over thousands of years. The universe had both a good side and a bad. It had to be constantly checked and kept in balance. To maintain this delicate equilibrium, the Egyptians sought the help of the gods. Gods born at the beginning of time. According to Egyptian mythology, there was once no heaven or earth, no day or night, no life or death, only primeval darkness and water. Then, in a moment that mirrored the annual flood of the ancient Nile, the waters receded and land emerged, forming the mound of creation. From there, the creator, Ra, the sun god, rose for the first time, casting his radiant light on the world. Ra then created the deities of air and water and separated the earth from the sky, allowing the rest of creation to unfold. While a myth to explain creation is not unique, the Egyptian version was. To them, creation was not a single, isolated event, but an ongoing cycle of renewal to be repeated daily with the rising of the sun. The myth of creation was embodied in every temple throughout ancient Egypt. Unlike a modern house of worship, Egyptian temples functioned more like machines engineered to keep the cycle of the universe in motion and chaos at bay. Literally called the mansion of the god, each was carefully designed to mirror the cosmos at the moment of creation. Two large towers, called pylons, flanked the entrance. Designed to represent the horizon, they were aligned so that the sun rose between them. To ward off evil, the pylons were decorated with recurring images of the pharaoh overpowering his enemies. Inside, bathed in the life-giving rays of the sun, was the courtyard. This was as far into the temple as ordinary people could go. From there, a ramp led to a semi-lit hall filled with columns shaped like papyrus and lotus plants, representing the marshes which rimmed the edge of the rising mound of creation. Their buds and flowers evoke the fertility of creation about to unfold. Beyond lay the inner sanctum, where the statue of the god was the focus of a sacred ritual. Each morning, just before sunrise, a priest, cleansed for purity and draped in white linen, lights a torch to guide him through the darkness. In the inner sanctuary, he cleanses the air with incense to awaken the god who resides in a shrine prepared for his earthly visits. The priest identifies himself to the god. Only the king, a god himself, can stand in the presence of the deity unless he delegates his authority to a chosen one. "It is the king who sends me," says the priest. Then the shrine is opened, the god is unveiled, and the moment of creation is reenacted once again as it was in the beginning of time. The appearance of the sun evoked the true meaning and mystery of the universe for the ancient Egyptians, the promise of the continuation of life and the triumph over death. It also marked both the beginning and the end of an epic voyage. Every day, the sun god Ra travels through the sky from east to west in a solar boat on the waters of the celestial Nile. At night, he plunges back into the primeval waters of the abyss and descends into the netherworld, the domain of the dead. The cycle must be completed for Ra to be reborn. But the netherworld is a perilous place. Waiting to consume the god was a host of horrible demons. The worst was a creature named Apep. In the burial chamber of a pharaoh, the keeper of Egyptian antiquities at the British Museum, Vivian Davis, inspects an inscription describing the most dangerous leg of the journey.
This very important scene shows the sun god Ra with his divine attendants on his sacred bark on his journey through the underworld. This is a journey fraught with danger, as he will meet the powerful forces of evil, darkness, and chaos. Most prominent among them, a giant snake, Apepi, who seeks to destroy him. These hieroglyphic spells, however, will ensure that Ra emerges unscathed. This hieroglyph here, depicting Apepi, shows him to have been killed with a knife through his throat. And so, Ra, at the dawning of the day, will arise again, and the dead king will be resurrected with him.
The resurrection of the king, like the renewal of the cosmos, was a concept crucial to the continuation of the world as the Egyptians knew it. The ongoing struggle of life over death and order over chaos would come to dominate the everyday lives of the ancient Egyptians. For help, they looked to their gods as the first line of defense. But in the temples, access to the gods wasn't easy. If the people couldn't go in, the gods would have to come out. In the ancient capital of Thebes on the east bank of the Nile, the great temples at Karnak and Luxor stand testament to the power of the gods. Throughout history, every town and village in Egypt had a local deity. In Thebes, it was the god Amun-Ra. If the town produced a line of pharaohs, the prominence of the god rose. And so it was in Thebes. Beginning in the New Kingdom around 1550 BC, Amun-Ra reigned as the king of all the gods of Egypt. His cult statue resided in the main temple of the state, the magnificent shrine at Karnak, the largest in the world. Several times a year, the statue was escorted out of its sanctuary by a procession of priests to visit other temples. One was a small temple on the west bank of the Nile at Medinet Habu. Peter Dorman of the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute is recording an inscription commemorating a meeting between the pharaoh and the god. The temple was a very special place. The Thebans believed it marked the spot of the original mound of creation, where Amun-Ra and the other primeval gods first came into being.
This is one of the sanctuaries where the statue of the god Amun would have been brought at the culmination of the festival procession in order to receive offerings made to the statue by the king himself. And on the wall of this sanctuary, we have an image of exactly the kind of offerings that would be made. Now, the figures on this relief have been hacked up during the medieval period for superstitious reasons. But aside from the hacking, we can see very clearly the figure of the king on the right and the figure of the god Amun on the left, seated on his throne, and between them an enormous pile of offerings consisting of jars of perfumed oils, cuts of meat, different types of loaves of bread, vegetables. Below, a slaughtered carcass of a cow. The king, of course, is the representative of mankind, and by offering the fruits of the earth to the god, enabled the god to reciprocate by offering important things back to the king, such as eternity as kingship and the years of eternity upon the throne. And in this fashion, the offering would reconfirm the creation of the world for another year.
The procession of the god was the culmination of a festival, for the Egyptians, a time to celebrate. Borne aloft in a ceremonial boat, the statue of Amun-Ra was carried down the avenue of Sphinxes to the temple of Luxor. Too holy an image to be viewed, the statue of Amun-Ra was concealed by a shroud. Along the way, specially built chapels filled with offerings provided rest stops for the god and the priests, while vendors lined the route supplying food to the masses. The procession was one of the few times when an ordinary Egyptian had direct access to such an important god. Communication came in the guise of an oracle. As the procession drew near, a petitioner would dash in front of the boat and call out a simple yes or no question to the god. Will an unpopular foreman be removed from the job? Will a loved one return from a journey safely? Should I buy this cow? A step forward signified yes. A step backward meant no. Oracles were the last word in divine intervention. kings consulted them on the most important matters of state: war, a foreign expedition, or even the succession. But no one used them to greater advantage than Hatshepsut, the queen who would be king. Hatshepsut was the half-sister and wife of King Thutmose II. When he died, his son, Thutmose III, was too young to rule, so Hatshepsut became the acting ruler. But the ambitious queen had other plans. She donned the trappings of kingship and had herself crowned pharaoh. Stone blocks from the dismantled Red Chapel at Karnak, one of the rest stops of Amun-Ra during processions, document the event.
These blocks show the important gods of Egypt crowning Hatshepsut as king. Interestingly enough, the hieroglyphs that accompany the scenes sometimes refer to her as a woman and sometimes as a man. But the figures always show her as a man. Take this scene here. She's being crowned by the god Amun-Ra with the goddess Hathor in attendance. She is wearing the usual royal attire, in this case the Atef crown, the royal beard and the Shendid kilt. But you can see that her body is that of a male. This was very important for her, because the king of Egypt, the ruler of Egypt, always had to be a man.
To sanction this extraordinary move, Hatshepsut seized the moment. During a public outing, the god Amun-Ra stopped before her and pronounced via an oracle that she was the rightful king. Whether by divine intervention or human manipulation, the oracle carried the weight of truth. What was good for the gods was good for Egypt. But in everyday life, faith in the gods and their power would come closer to home. "1400 years before the birth of Christ, this desert village, now called Deir el-Medina, was the home of the craftsmen who built the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. Today, the dry environment has preserved a unique glimpse into their everyday lives. Lives touched by deities and demons from the cradle to the grave and beyond. The greatest threat to life came at birth. At a time when 1 in 3 Egyptian babies died, pregnant women were considered magnets for demons. Giving birth was a joyful event, but like the creation of the world itself, it was surrounded by danger. On the day of delivery, the mother-to-be retired to the outside or the front of the house to prevent demons from overrunning the place. In many homes, archaeologists have identified what may be a birth box. Built to protect and shelter the mother and child, it was decorated with a parade of fierce-looking deities. The goddess Tawaret had the body of a pregnant hippopotamus, the tail of a crocodile, and often wielded a knife. Hippos were known to be fierce protectors of their young. The god Bes was a bow-legged dwarf with the mane of a lion and a protruding tongue, a gesture meant to intimidate enemies. As the birth drew near, a wand made from the tusks of a hippopotamus and adorned with figures of Tawaret and Bes and other defending powers, was used to draw a protective circle around the bed, and later around the crib of the newborn baby. Assisted by two midwives representing the Great Mother Isis and her sister Nephthys, the mother squatted on special birth bricks or stools while spells were recited invoking the gods for a safe and speedy delivery. A magician called a knower of things presided over the rituals. By donning a mask, he or she became the conduit for the deity Beset, the female form of Bes, often depicted holding a bronze snake in each hand. Ivory clappers frightened away any lingering danger. The Egyptians maintained a belief that the perils of this life could be overcome by invoking gods who had overcome their own hardships, especially Isis and Osiris. The epic saga of their ordeals would form the basis of many Egyptian beliefs and practices. According to the myth of creation, Osiris, the great-grandson of the creator Ra, inherited the right to be king, but his brother Seth was jealous. To gain the throne for himself, he lured Osiris into a coffin, slammed it shut, and threw it into the river. Isis, Osiris's wife and sister, went in search of her dead husband. When she found him, she used her magical powers to bring him back to life. But Seth was undaunted. Resorting to butchery, he chopped his brother up and again hurled him into the river. Isis recovered enough pieces to conceive a son. Osiris then descended into the underworld to become king of the dead, while Isis hid in the marshes to protect her newborn child, Horus, the rightful heir. One of the most popular amulets was the Wedjat, the Eye of Horus, the universal symbol of healing and wholeness. It represents the eye that Horus lost during the battle with the evil god Seth to avenge the murder of his father Osiris. Amulets were common to ward off evil and promote good luck. The Ankh, the hieroglyph meaning life, was a powerful symbol of protection. The scarab represents the dung beetle that crawls out of the earth daily, seemingly recreating itself. A potent symbol of renewal, it pushes its dung ball like the orb of the sun, rolling across the sky. Amulets could also be spells written on a piece of papyrus worn around the neck. One spell to quell a headache reads, "Turn back, Sahekek, demon which came forth from heaven and earth, whose eyes are in his head and whose tongue is in his buttocks. He feeds on filth. I know the name of your mother, I know the name of your father. Stay away from me." But the cause of an illness or adversity was not always clear. Perhaps the gods had been offended. To cover themselves, shrines to the gods were maintained in each house. The workmen at Deir el-Medina could worship the deities of their choice. A favorite was the snake goddess, Meret Seger, she who loves silence. To make sure their pleas were heard, ears were carved on offering tablets made of stone. Poisonous snakes were common in the desert. On the theory that what could harm you could also be used to help you, the Egyptians deified the spirits of dangerous animals and invoked their help and protection. In the shadow of the Great Pyramids at Giza, archaeologists have uncovered the cemetery of the builders. While their tombs may be humbler than the pharaohs, securing an afterlife was no less important. In one, Zahi Hawass, the director of the Giza Plateau, has found a curse left by an artisan named Peteti.
This tomb is for one of the artisans who worked in building the pyramids since 4,600 years ago. As we see, his name was Peti. He built his tomb, what's left over of building the pyramids. He saved maybe big piece of limestone like that, and he wrote in this big limestone block a very interesting inscription, a curse inscription. Listen what he's saying here. He said, from the left, listen all of you. I never did anything wrong in my life. This is why the gods likes me. If anyone will disturb my tomb, he will be eaten by the crocodile, the hippo, and the lion. His wife, in the other side, left the same inscription, but she added more here, and the scorpion and the snakes. And this is to show that women, only in the past, take revenge more than men.
The dead could be spiteful, but they could also be powerful allies. Because demons and deities resided in the underworld, villagers set up household shrines and made offerings to their ancestors. Now equipped with their own divine powers, the dead had direct access to the gods and could intervene on behalf of the family. To communicate with them, the Egyptians wrote letters to the dead that covered everything from legal problems to domestic strife to simple greetings. How are you? Is the West taking care of you as you desire? One read. Please become an effective spirit. Let a healthy son be born to me, said another. But not all ancestors were willing to intercede. Those who may have been slighted in death or bore a grudge in life could come back to haunt the family. In 1200 BC, a man stalked by misfortune thought it might be the doing of his dead wife. To reproach her, he wrote a letter reminding her that he'd been a caring and faithful husband, and it really wasn't his fault that he was away on business when she died. Whether she was guilty or not remains to be seen. Identifying malevolent spirits and pernicious demons was tricky business at best. But on the final journey into the afterlife, there was no room for error. When the Great Pyramid was built around 2580 BC, it was a vehicle for the pharaoh to achieve immortality. The son of the sun god Ra, there was little doubt he would go to heaven. But even ordinary Egyptians were promised an afterlife, though getting there was full of hurdles. The secret of immortality lay in the myth of resurrection. In it, the sun god Ra descends into the underworld to join Osiris, the god of the dead, then reappears at sunrise, reborn. Because the journey was a treacherous one, the Egyptians compiled a list of magic spells called Book of the Dead. A virtual guidebook to the afterlife, it was written on papyrus or linen and placed with the body to help the deceased recognize the inhabitants and landscape of the underworld so as to pass through it unharmed. In it there are spells to help the deceased remember his name. A soul without a name vanishes from existence. One to sail a boat across the celestial river. To guide him through the proper responses on the day of judgment. To reunite a corpse with its human-headed soul. But in order to attain bliss in the Egyptian version of heaven, the field of reeds, the dead must first travel from west to east through the underworld, passing through many gates. Each gate was guarded by a demon who devoured the souls of those destined to die. The key to disarming them was to know their secret names. The eavesdropper, the barker, the bloodsucker, and the raging one with hippopotamus face. But the deceased were not the only visitors to the realm of the dead. At night, sleepers and dreamers also descended into the underworld to commune with the gods. A dream was believed to be a revelation of truth, and its symbolism, though not always clear, was an omen of good or bad. To find out which, the Egyptians consulted specialists who were gifted at interpreting dreams. One celebrated scribe at Deir el-Medina, named Kenher-Kopshef, owned his own book of dreams. The only one ever discovered, it contains reams of ready-made interpretations. If a man sees himself in a dream dead, good. It means a long life. If a man sees himself in a dream, his bed catching fire, bad. It means driving away his wife. If a man sees himself in a dream drinking warm beer, bad. It means suffering. But Egyptians with problems could also pay others to dream for them. By 300 BC, dreams were an industry in ancient Egypt, and interpreting them, big business. Not far from the pyramids at Saqqara, outside modern Cairo, a priest named Hor left a remarkable record of his career. In great demand for the accuracy of his interpretations, he documented his success on potsherds, a collection of 65 texts dating back to 147 BC. In one, he records his own series of dreams about the foreman of a labor gang and a ghost at the temples where he worked. Egyptologist John Ray of the University of Cambridge has translated Hor's text.
The priest, Hor of Sebennytos, had two dreams on one particular night. One of them was quite humorous and the other was much more serious. In the first one, he dreamt he was going down the avenue that runs across the site where he worked. And it's a moonlit night, and he's surrounded by tombs, and in the middle of the avenue, he sees a ghost. And the ghost looks at him and says, "Have you brought the food for 60,000 ibises?" If you can imagine the amount of food that you need for 60,000 ibises. And Hor thinks and says, "I've left it at home." And I think we've all had dreams a bit like that, where suddenly you've got to do something and you find you can't do it, or you've made a mess of it. But the second dream was more serious. On the same night, he dreamt that he was in a labour gang, something which probably in his life he didn't do much of, and which wouldn't have been very pleasant if he had done. The foreman of the labour gang comes up and pays the money for him to escape. If you like, he puts up the bail for Hor to go away. And Hor goes back to his hometown. But the people on the labour gang chase after him. They won't let him go. And he's surrounded by them and looks up, and there is the foreman of the labour gang, the one who paid his money. And the foreman says, "You are in serious trouble. I am not a foreman, I am a god. I told you before, do not worship any god except me." And Hor says, "I will not do it again."
Hor interpreted the dreams to mean he was to go to Saqqara and dedicate himself to the cult of the ibis-headed god, Thoth. By night, he was paid to dream. By day, he worked as a scribe, recording the temple's activities. Later, Hor would play a key role in uncovering a scandal that would rock the cult. Each year, thousands of pilgrims burdened by problems or difficult decisions came to Saqqara to elicit help by purchasing mummified animals to serve as messengers to the gods. The animals represented deities held sacred by the Egyptians.
To the modern mind, a site like this must seem very strange indeed. You've got temples, and they're dedicated to various forms of animals, cats, dogs, birds, what have you. And those animals are then buried, mummified, and go off to join the world of the gods. And for some reason, people come from all over Egypt, or even from all over the known world, to come and visit this site. Now, why do they do it? They do it mainly because they feel that those animals were part of a world beyond themselves. And by going into the world of the gods, those animals are in a position to communicate with them.
Thoth was the god of knowledge and writing. Horus, the hawk god of the sky, was the avenger of his father, Osiris. While most of the great temples of Egypt remained off-limits, animal cults were readily accessible to the masses.
Here you had something much more human, much more personal. Here you had gods who were interested in the world of the little man, who could actually help him to sort out his problems. Now, in the modern world, the nearest example of that would be personal therapy. And if you want to think of the world of those cults at Saqqara as a sort of therapist, then you wouldn't be far off the reality of what was going on.
Below the cult temples, a series of catacombs are jammed with jars containing the mummies of the animals sacrificed to the gods. In the galleries belonging to the Ibis cult alone, there are over 1.5 million. A team of archaeologists led by Paul Nicholson of the University of Wales, working for the Egypt Exploration Society, has been exploring the catacombs to document the extent of the cults. Ibises were once one of the most common birds in Egypt. But at Saqqara, they were bred in captivity on a lake near the cult temple, carefully tended by priests. When they were needed, they were killed and mummified.
What happened to the dead birds would be that they would be taken from the lake and wrapped in linen bandages, traces of which can still be seen here. and in some cases they may have been eviscerated, in others they may have just been desiccated or dipped into bitumen. Whatever the method, they would then be wrapped in bandages. Inside here will be a bird, something like this, and quite elaborate bandaging could be applied to some of the examples. Occasionally we get little votive appliques showing one of the deities associated with the animal necropolis.
The sheer magnitude of the mummies at Saqqara suggests an industry ripe for corruption. Even so, Paul Nicholson was hardly prepared for what he found in the catacombs of the cult of Horus.
We know that roughly the same process went on for the mummification of the hawks. But since birds of prey are much more difficult to breed in captivity than ibis, we often find that rather than the mummy packets containing a genuine hawk or other bird of prey, what we actually have are parts of ibis or sticks or occasionally part of a falcon wrapped to look like the complete mummy of the god. And it's those substitute mummies which often occur in the vessels rather than the genuine item.
In 172 BC, the scandal broke. According to Hor, who recorded the event, 6 priests, 3 from the cult of the hawk, 3 from the ibis cult, were tried and convicted of swindling pilgrims by selling them fake mummies. The outcome was a series of regulations and routine inspections to prevent further abuse. While millions of creatures continued to be sacrificed at Saqqara, elsewhere the death of one special animal was a call for national mourning. At a temple in Memphis, a bull called the Apis was believed to be the incarnation of Ptah, the creator god of Memphis, one of Egypt's most important deities. In death, it was afforded all the rituals of a king, beginning with the process of mummification. Adjacent to the sanctuary, Michael Jones of the American Research Center in Egypt has identified the site where the embalmed body of the Apis bull was purified.
This magnificent lion bed is made of alabaster, a stone which was associated in the ancient Egyptians' minds with purity and cleanliness, which suggests that the actual dirty work that prepared the bull's body for mummification was done elsewhere, in another building somewhere else, and that this would have been used for the ritual purifications which were the final stage, preparing the bull's mummy for its burial in the Serapeum at Saqqara. The priests would have brought the completed mummy on a wooden carrying frame, placed it on the top of this lion bed within the riveted surface that you can see on the top, poured libations of water over the mummy, and then those would have been allowed to flow out through this spout at the end of the bed. And because they were so powerfully charged with the power of the god's mummy, they would have then been collected in this basin, not allowed just to flow away anywhere, but collected in the basin, whose enormous size gives some idea of the quantity of liquids needed for this ritual purification process.
After embalming, the sacred bull was carried to Saqqara for burial in the extraordinary catacombs known as the Serapeum. Here, a gallery several hundred feet long opens onto 28 massive chambers, each dwarfed by a giant sarcophagus carved out of a single block of granite weighing up to 80 tons. For 2,000 years, Apis bulls had been enshrined in the Serapeum, Some in stone, the earliest in wooden coffins, dating back to the 18th dynasty when Egypt was in its glory. But ironically, animal cults would reach their zenith after Egypt was conquered, first by the Assyrians, then the Persians, and finally the Greeks. Egyptologists now suspect their rise in popularity was the direct result of an identity crisis. For the first time in its long history, Egypt was no longer the center of the universe. Under the sway of a new imperial power, the very essence of the world's most enduring civilization was slipping away. In the midst of the turmoil, the Egyptians fell back on the only thing that was truly their own, their mysterious religion. To a world that no longer envied their ancient culture, they were asserting by their devotion. These are our deities and demons, our gods. They are who we are. They are what set us apart. For 3,000 years, they are what made us Egyptians.